40 years. That is how long the British government has been running its bovine tuberculosis control program. 40 years. £150 million of taxpayer money spent every single year. 38,000 cattle slaughtered in England in 2023 alone. The disease is still spreading. Nobody resigned. Nobody was held to account. Nobody redesigned the program from the ground up. And then Jeremy Clarkson's cows got TB. And suddenly, the entire country wanted to understand something that 4 decades of farming policy had successfully kept invisible. Because this was never a story about sick cattle. It was a story about a system so comprehensively broken that it required a celebrity farmer and a television audience of millions to make the British public ask a question that farmers had been asking since 1984, and the department responsible never saw it coming. Jeremy Charles Robert Clarkson, the son of a Paddington Bear toy salesman from Doncaster, bought Diddley Squat Farm in the Cotswolds in 2008 for £6 million. He knew almost nothing about farming. He hired Caleb Cooper, who was already working the land before Clarkson arrived, as farm manager. He planted crops that failed. He built a farm shop that shouldn't have worked. He lost £144 in his first year of trading, and then Amazon put cameras on all of it. What nobody in the British agricultural establishment fully calculated was what happens when the grinding, invisible, generational misery of bovine tuberculosis gets filmed in high definition and distributed to a global streaming audience. Because TB had been happening to British farmers for decades, it had just never been watched. Bovine tuberculosis is caused by Mycobacterium bovis. It spreads between cattle and between wildlife, primarily badgers in England and Wales, through shared grazing land, water sources, and direct contact. An infected animal can carry the disease for months before any test detects it. A herd can pass a routine skin test in March and be under a movement restriction order by August. When a reactor is confirmed, a single animal testing positive, the entire herd goes on lockdown. Movement off the farm stops. Sales stop. The breeding program stops. Income stops. Then the slaughter order arrives. The animal is taken. Compensation is paid based on a government valuation table. The farmer receives a figure that, in most cases, bears no relationship to the market value of the animal they have just been legally compelled to surrender. There is no meaningful right of appeal on that valuation. The animal is gone. The money, whatever it is, arrives weeks later. This had been happening to British farmers every single year since the 1980s, quietly, without cameras, without audiences, without anyone outside agricultural circles paying much attention. And here is where the story stops being about one farm in Chipping Norton and starts being about something the British government had spent 40 years hoping nobody would look at too carefully. Now, here is the part that even people who watched every episode of Clarkson's Farm never fully joined up. The government's primary TB control mechanism, the licensed culling of badgers in high-risk areas, was introduced as policy precisely because infected badgers are the primary wildlife reservoir for bovine TB in England. Remove the reservoir, the logic runs, and you reduce transmission to cattle. The science does not cleanly support that conclusion. What peer-reviewed research has consistently shown, including evidence cited by the government's own advisors, is that culled badger populations are disrupted. Surviving animals range further to find new territories. They move through farmland they would not otherwise have entered. They make contact with cattle herds they would never have reached. The technical term for this is perturbation. The practical consequence is that culling in one area can measurably increase TB incidence in the surrounding areas. The cull was not ending the disease. In some documented cases, it was moving it. DEFRA, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, had been funding and licensing this program while simultaneously tracking TB incidence maps that showed the disease expanding its geographic range every single year. The Cotswolds, where Diddley Squat sits, has been classified as a high-risk area for bovine TB continuously since that designation system was introduced. Clarkson's herd was not unlucky. They were in exactly the wrong place, under exactly the wrong policy, with exactly the right camera crew. When the TB test results came back positive at Diddley Squat, the reaction from the viewing public was what you would predict. Shock, grief, outrage on Clarkson's behalf. That was the wrong response. And it was aimed in entirely the wrong direction, because Clarkson himself, to his genuine credit, understood that the outrage should not be personal. He had been farming for 5 years. The family 3 farms over had been watching cattle disappear to slaughter orders for 30 years. The emotional devastation that landed on his audience as a dramatic television moment was For thousands of British farming families, an unremarkable Tuesday. The failure is the story. Not his failure, the system's failure. And the system had been failing expensively and quietly for longer than some of those farming families had been alive. The compensation arithmetic deserves to be stated plainly. Government TB compensation is paid at what is called the Table A valuation, a schedule of payments per category of animal that is reviewed periodically, but has not kept pace with genuine cattle market values. A high health status pedigree animal, the kind that takes years of careful breeding to develop, the kind that represents not just its own value but the genetic potential of an entire future breeding line, is compensated at a figure that veterinary and agricultural economists have repeatedly described as structurally inadequate. The farmer cannot say no. The slaughter order is not an offer. It is a legal requirement. You do not negotiate. You do not appeal the valuation in any practical sense. You comply and you receive what the table says you receive, and then, if you want to restock, you restock into the same high-risk landscape, under the same policy framework, knowing the same thing may happen again. Some farmers in the Cotswolds have gone through this cycle multiple times. You cannot manufacture that kind of institutional injustice. You can only point a camera at it and wait for the country to catch up. Stand back. Look at the full picture. Jeremy Clarkson paid £6 million for a farm in 2008 that is now valued as part of an enterprise worth an estimated £45 million. He has turned a £144 first-year profit into a farm shop, generating an estimated £2 million in annual revenue, a pub employing 146 people, and a brewery posting £21.3 million in revenue in 2025, up from £7.8 million the previous year. Amazon pays somewhere between £10 and £12 million annually for the right to film it all. None of that makes the TB crisis smaller. It makes it more visible. Because the thing Clarkson's farm did, the thing that 40 years of agricultural lobbying, parliamentary questions, and industry campaigns could not do, was make the British public feel what bovine TB actually costs. Not in pounds per animal on a compensation table, in something that does not appear on any government spreadsheet. In the particular silence of a cattle shed that used to be full, the department thought it was managing a disease. It was funding the most damaging argument against its own policy ever broadcast on a streaming platform. There are genuine risks still unresolved. The government's new TB eradication strategy, announced with considerable optimism, has set a target date for achieving officially TB-free status in England. The independent scientific community's assessment of whether the current policy toolkit, culling, testing, movement restrictions, and the early-stage cattle vaccination trials can actually achieve that target within the stated time frame is, to use the precise word, skeptical. The vaccination trials are real. The science is promising. The timeline is ambitious to the point where several of the researchers involved in the trial design have quietly declined to endorse the official target date in public. And in the Cotswolds, in the high-risk area, on the farms that do not have Amazon paying the bills or 2 million annual visitors buying honey and beef, the skin tests continue. The slaughter orders continue. The compensation table continues. 40 years. £150 million a year. That is not a disease control program. That is a managed failure with an annual budget. And it took a man who once drove a car across Vietnam for television to make the country finally look at it directly. If you found this as useful as I hope you have, do consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. And the video on your screen right now covers another corner of this story that I think will genuinely surprise you. I'd love to know, if you farm in the UK or if you know someone who does, has bovine TB touched your family? Drop it in the comments. Those stories deserve to be told too. Thank you, as always, for watching.